Howdy there, folks. We are back again with very negative naval prestige, but very low unrest. So I think we're doing things quite well. Now, naturally, I've been continually bumping up the tech budget. I'm doing everything I can to try to realign things. I mean, that's not even that much money. But we are slowly building out. We have our own Battleship, which is nice. And Battleship is generous, a term. It's a very generous term. But I think that we are getting there. We have built a Battleship. Now, I've got these, which no one is buying, which is making me sad. But hey, look, the monthly balance is back up. Infrastructure is back up. Everything's running fine. Let's see. Active fleet is going fine. Brazil is invading Bolivia, which is Brazil's issue, not my problem. I'm telling the Ottomans they can go fuck themselves because I'm Brazil. You're not, I would just tell them, you're not even in this hemisphere. Why are you talking to me? So you can see trying to build up that shipyard that big is just not going to work. So I need to build the shipyards like that much at a time, which is just barely scraping by, but doing our best. Doing our best. I'm gonna, okay, how many of these do we got? We have 10 light cruisers. I'm gonna try to get 2 battleships and 10 light cruisers. Oh boy, that's above my funds by a lot. No one wants to buy the fancy ones for no reason. That's dumb, because the fancy ones are nice. They're very fancy. They are the fanciest boats. All right, so where was I in my history? The cursedness of Brazil's battleships. Well, dreadnoughts, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. These things were, without a doubt, some of the most cursed ships in history. Now, they don't see a lot of action, like military action. You know, it's not like their cursedness is a result of some bad doctrine choice in a battle. And then people, I always hate when people are so quick to judge and go, aren't these the worst boats ever because they didn't do anything? That can just be bad leadership. All right, here, I'm going to do what they normally do. We'll build 4, 2. We'll build a number. All right, I'm gonna get like a few more of these, and I'm just going to put them in Santos, and I'm going to try to afford them. But yeah, Brazil's battleships were cursed, and we have to begin there. I have a lot of ideas as to why they were cursed. There's a lot of supporting information, but you're going to have to forgive me as I take a step back and do a comfortable analysis of mine. Any of you who've watched Deckstock's Battletech know a bit too well that when a military buys something new but doesn't adapt its capabilities or its doctrine or, say, modern culture, you end up with some boo-boos, and these boo-boos kind of fuck your day up. Brazil ended slavery officially in 1888. This makes them the last country in the Americas to end slavery. Oh, and here comes Mr. Train. You know what? Rather than me yell at it, can we just play Elegy of a Train Man? Yesterday morning, the guy honked quite literally 30 times on the way to the crossing and through it. There was no one at the crossing. It's just this guy said, I really need to honk this horn right now. Every toot of that horn brought back a long absent lover, or perhaps righted some existential wrong in the balance of his life, and just made him feel more whole, I guess. And it kept happening. He just kept tooting that horn, and he had to. For the sake of his soul, for the sake of his life, to toot the horn. And he just kept going at it. Every push of that button fed him positive endorphins, positive dopamine.
It made up for all of the shortcomings in his career to this point. Everyone who passed him over for a promotion or said he was dumb, or that he was a sloppy eater or kept a poor home, or that he was sad and lonely and had eyes that haunted others. Every press of that button made that slightly more correct in the grand balance of things. Every long toot, a reaffirmation that no, he is not a loser, and that he is not alone. But as the horn fades, that sharp burn of reality comes back, and he starts to have doubts, and perhaps it sits right above his stomach, right below the sternum, in that pit of anxiety. Perhaps it nests there and burns outward in a radius and slowly boils over him till he panics and his fingers begin to shake and his toes begin to tap. And he presses the button again. Must be hard to be a train man.
Yeah, that sums it up better than I could. But yeah, Brazil ended slavery in 1888. This last country in the Americas to end slavery, and its traditions in that were seen so favorably by certain parties that 20,000 Brazilian confederados migrated to Brazil to continue slavery. They still do Festa Confederata today. It exists. So unresolved issues like this for a government typically bring dividends that they're unprepared for. And the Dreadnoughts show up in 1910, right? And already by November of that year, they're involved in a revolt. And this revolt kind of defines their presence in Brazil. It is like the first case of uh-oh. So the Brazilian Navy had a bad habit of employing capital and corporal punishment abroad, and people of mixed race or darker skin tone were frequently in lower stations in the Brazilian Navy. And when they got out of hand, they were whipped. And I mean like whipped until their skin split open. It was really horrific. To be honest, the Navy applied corporal punishment for even like minor issues. Some people were whipped for you didn't salute. That's a discipline issue. But some people were whipped for just saying the wrong thing, or looking like somebody who might, or having a wrong item in your bag when you came on board. And I'm not talking like drugs. I'm talking like a beer. They were pretty ruthless. And so a very carefully planned mutiny took control. And by take control, I mean this revolt takes control of the Minas Gerais, and after killing the ship's commander and the loyal crewmen to that ship's commander, who, when they were told that, hey, this is a revolt, you fucking lose, those guys pulled their guns, and so the mutineers killed the shit out of them. And then soon after, they also had the Sao Paulo and several other vessels. So, I mean, this wasn't just a revolt on a boat. This was a revolt in the Navy. And it's substantial. So at that point, the government no longer has the upper hand. The only loyal naval forces they have are just all the older boats. And well, the government was like thinking of what to do. The rebels had just started communicating. They sent a telegram. And it was fairly simple. By the way, Chile just took over Peru. So now I have an even larger Chile to bother with. But hey, I own Bolivia. Brazil grows larger. So it looks like everybody is just kind of taking pieces of their neighbors right now, which is fine. But yeah, the government didn't know what to do. The rebels started communicating, and the rebels' demands were fairly simple. No more lash, no more of that stuff, and respond immediately. And if you don't, we'll destroy the city. I mean, you know, that kind of puts the point home, right? They also said they'd blow up any ships that were revolting. So, like, keep the rest of the Navy away. These guys were, let's just say, understandably upset. And we're more than willing with their firepower to act, because once you've already killed people in a revolt, it's you can't uncork that. You're gonna definitely be paying for that choice. By not building a larger shipyard, I can build a larger selection of boats. So I'm going to hope to get it up to 20. Yeah, I think I could probably get it up to 20 of these light cruisers and then update them again. And when that happens, I will at least have something of a cruiser fleet, I'm hoping. Even though all of these are ruinously expensive and probably going to require me to, let's see, what it is. Yeah, my naval pool could probably take it, but only just. So to make their point during this revolt, some messages were sent to the government. And while the government was like trying to stall and say, oh yeah, we'll look into it. And, if you just do this or do that. Meanwhile, they were like absolutely plotting a military takeover to sink the ships, all these other things, which would again been a massive disaster. Especially, even if you sink the boats at this point, you have destroyed the larger ships in your Navy because of unresolved issues. Like, that is horrifying. So while the government is like dragging its feet and trying to negotiate with people, the naval flotilla just starts shelling some army forts and a naval arsenal, and then the presidential palace and all the other ways that let them know that, hey, you guys on land, you don't have a dreadnought. It's effectively like the whole "look at me, I am the captain now" sort of thing, and it's just saying I have power projection and you don't. However, one shell accidentally hit a house and killed 2 kids, and the rebels actually pooled money to bury them, as they were like absolutely devastated by this. They wanted to fight the government. They didn't want to hurt people. And there's a lot of effort inside the rebellion to like not shoot at cities, but to shoot over them and into military targets. There was some negotiation. There was some fuckery. So the rebels took the big ships out into the bay, out into open waters, because they were worried about government destroyers committing torpedo attacks on them while they were sitting there like negotiating with shore. And what's kind of interesting is how the whole thing was resolved. You end up with government voting for amnesty, which when I did look it up, it passes the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies 125 to 23. So the government is like, amnesty in this thing. And the mutineers agreed to it. But there were some last minute additional measures argued back and forth, like increases in salary, because who wouldn't? I've never met anyone who was in the Navy who said they pay me too much, ever. Consider how these ships were bought and what they were intended for. Now look at 1 year in and what's happened to them. Naturally, the Navy just recruited the ships and changed policies and retrained people, right? Wrong. These ships were cursed, as I said. So the first thing the Navy does after the revolt is disarm all the guns on the big ships by removing the breech blocks. They were that afraid of another rebellion. All they had to do is look at what it did the last time it ran amok, and this decision to them was easy. There were people in the government and in the press that said, just get rid of these fucking things. Sell them, make the money back, reinvest in other stuff. But then politics entered. See, the president could not sell the ships because it would cause all sorts of problems, even though most military officers agreed now that Brazil needed smaller ships to patrol its numerous inland waterways, Brazil's numerous rivers, and everything else a military trying to defend its sovereign territory might want. What the government did do, though, was they contacted Armstrong and they were like, hey, stop making the third dreadnought. It just, we kind of are dreadnoughted out. we've had an event. And what's crazy is this starts a next phase of the dreadnought race. This causes Argentina to stop buying another dreadnought. Argentina also cancels its third dreadnought. I'll get more into Argentina's dreadnought race when I play as them, which should probably be next because there's a lot of, overlap with what I'm doing now. Now, some of you might want to know the aftermath of this whole thing. Did the revolt give the sailors anything? Well, no, not really. Many sailors, in fact, were arrested a few times over for the claim that they were planning another rebellion. And there were other mutinies during this time, adding to that problem. Many previously amnestied sailors were rounded up and sent off to prison. They were just presumed to be part of the next big problem, or the next, and it just kind of marked them. And some improvements were made. They actually saw an increase in literacy for the first time in many decades in the Navy, especially in apprenticeship programs. But successive administrations more or less just let the Navy rot. They let it fall into disrepair and be forgotten. They started to invest money in other systems. For South America, especially Brazil, these dreadnoughts had become more a liability than they were worth. They could add to a rebellion, and then in between, they required oceans of maintenance. And Brazil and Argentina and many other countries had not invested in the infrastructure to build these ships in the first place, let alone work on them, which started to add to their cost of operation. And anytime anybody wants to try to judge whether or not somebody should be investing in such a investment like a battleship or a dreadnought, all they had to do was look at what they had gotten for it, look at the sheer cost of it, and then opt not to spend the money. They didn't opt to get rid of the dreadnoughts outright. They just were like, ah, yeah, those. And then just kind of quietly swept it under the counter. It was a thing where they just said, these things are cursed. Let's not feed them and just let them be forgotten about. And this point, with the rest of the government kind of starting to slowly forget about them and the aftermath of the revolt, the Brazilian dreadnoughts are a turning point, a major turning point in its history. It's all downhill for the Brazilian Navy after this for a long, long time. It's like not until the 70s or 80s you start to see things suddenly become more important. And World War I stopped any further major ship orders, and dreadnought fever just kind of passes. So if you want to know what happened to the Brazilian dreadnoughts, I'll tell you. Brazil entered World War I in 1917. And at that time, its 2 dreadnoughts, now just a little bit old with the advance of technology, were offered to the UK for service. This is their like, hey, you can take these off our hands for a couple of years. Because the Brazilians presumed that, hey, maybe the British will buy them. Maybe they'll rent them. Maybe they'll just take them and upgrade them and give them back. You know what I mean? Just they were like, it'll be off our plate, easy win. And the British said no. They looked at the ships and they said, these ships are not in suitable condition. It's too expensive to upgrade them. These are in terrible maintenance. And so that, kind of ended that. Now, many in Brazil were hurt. Many in the Brazilian Navy were upset because they pointed out, yeah, you got the budget, all these other things. But to be true, the lack of investment in major shipyards and the works that feed them meant that these ships had not been maintained properly since they arrived. So to prove my argument in this point, the Sao Paulo was sent overseas for modernization, as again, the Brazilian Navy lacked the capacity to do so. And American yards picked up the work. They had a lot of experience with dreadnoughts and even super dreadnoughts by this time. Embarrassingly, by the time it showed up to the American yard, almost 14 of its 18 boilers had failed in transit. It almost didn't make it from South America to New York, and only did so thanks to the help of the U.S. Navy, who showed up. The Minas Gerais was sent for modernization afterward, but both ships weren't fixed or returned to service until 1921. And from that point on, they just serve as tools of the state. They took Queen Elizabeth, not Z, but S, Elizabeth of Belgium, not Queen Elizabeth of the UK. They took Queen Elizabeth of Belgium to Brazil. They returned the bodies of Emperor Pedro II and his wife to Brazil. And amazingly, they helped stop another revolt by shelling Rio de Janeiro's Fort Copacabana. Sounds like a happy ending, right? Starts a revolt, ends a revolt. No, it gets worse. So another revolt happens in 1924, where young officers take over the Sao Paulo, and they took it to Montevideo to seek asylum, which was granted, starting yet another diplomatic incident. But they were in really poor condition, and the reason they chose Montevideo as a landing point is because they probably couldn't make it much further, as the ships had very bad condensers on board, they had very low food on board, and the ship was in awful repair. So the ship was returned to the Brazilian government soon after. So Minas Gerais was further modernized at home from 1931 to 1938, with many work stoppages complicating the matter. Sao Paulo, meanwhile, was part of the naval force blockading Santos during the Constitutionalist Revolt of 1932. There, the ship's poor maintenance and bad repair was again causing problems. During that operation, it could only make 10 knots. Fantastic. By World War II, both of these ships were defensive only, largely as floating batteries in need of, again, massive repair and upgrades. So they acted as harbor defense ships. After the war, it was just universally said, their time is done, scrap them. So the Sao Paulo was sent to the breakers in August of 47 and was sent to a British shipmaker for scrapping. En route, the tow line broke somewhere north of the Azores, and despite an extensive search by the American and British militaries, the ship was never found. Minas Gerais itself was sent to an Italian breaker and then towed to Genoa for dismantlement in 54. And that's pretty much all they ever did. That's it. These ships were cursed. They didn't do a whole lot for the government other than cause problems. And they were pretty much a worst case outcome for the Brazilian state, because rather than give them new tools, sovereignty, and respect, the ships just become embroiled in one problem after another. And they just turn into this massive, massive hole in the budget. And it's not fun to suddenly find yourself as, like, let's say you came into the Navy a few years after the Dreadnoughts were bought, and suddenly you find out all of your plans and budget are just gone. They're all gone. It is all eroded. You ask yourself, why is it all eroded? Why is it all gone? Well, you have these two giant holes in the budget that you have to keep shoveling money. And it's like, fuck. You end up with this massive, massive problem for nothing. A lot of other things could have been bought with that money, and they realized that as time went on. They were like, oh shit, we should have bought X, we should have bought Y, we should have invested in all of these other things. And that's kind of the gamble of strategic investment. You find a lot of weapon systems that say, you know, faster, deadlier, cheaper, greater power projection, whatever the hell it is. And that's fine. That's fine as an idea. But then you have to look at the reality of it. What do these things do once you buy them? What's it look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? You can't buy weapon systems like ordering a pizza. Well, you can, but you shouldn't. You should think of these things as like a pet that's going to grow over the course of the next 10, 20 years. And are you going to be kind of in that mindset that's going to take care of it and provide for it and all of these other things? Weapon systems are like that. They may even have generations of men and women serving on them. So you have to be very, very careful. Impulse buys are usually bad ones. And Brazil bought Dreadnoughts like they were in the checkout line at the grocery store. Then again, a lot of South America also did the same thing. And then a lot of America also did the same thing. So you'll find that the Dreadnought race is not so much just a necessary and strict race, kind of what Tirpitz got at in his calculations, what he called the danger zone leading up to World War I in his fleet calculations. But you start to see that a lot of people make really silly choices during this time, and they all play out differently. Some people buy navies that just rust. Other people buy navies that they use immediately. I can't say who was wiser. Because sure, you could say that, like, you know, the UK's great investment in Navy over 150 years certainly brought dividends. But they're an island nation. They have always had a Navy. For land-based powers, you're going to have to really realize that there are two views that largely shape naval thinking in the 1800s. Man's, history of sea power and all that other stuff, and talking about how great Pax Britannica is, his stuff is great, but it's limited. He's a naval officer, and he doesn't have a lot of naval command time. And that shapes things. If you want to go look at another observer who got things mostly right. Fred T. Jane's Heresies of Sea Power. That is the other book you need to read, because Fred goes, yeah, you know, Britain has Pax Britannica and all these fleets and all this stuff, and it has to because it has colonies all over the world. But other nations that don't have colonies all over the world and don't need to defend its interests all over the world, these are land powers. And land powers probably shouldn't buy large navies. They should buy enough navy to keep the sea power away and then continue to be land powers where they have all of their experience. I think James was right. There is a lot of overbelief in the power of a navy in this time, because for a very brief window, a very large navy certainly does look good. But the problem is it gets into this very, very, very bizarre case where imagine talking to someone who said, I invested 40 years ago and now I can do whatever I want. If you see that as an outcome for somebody, and you're and they are proudly, you know, beating their chest saying, I saved for 40 years and now I have all this money and blah, 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 blah. It is the wrong time at that moment to begin investing. They have a 40-year lead on you. You are not going to, with any amount of money other than robbing a bank, you're probably not going to be able to equate that investment. You can learn parts from that investment. You can see what dividends do what. You can learn from other people's mistakes and their triumphs, and you can find out what works for you. The problem is that a lot of Royal Navy thinking was, oh, of course you should have a giant fucking Navy. I have a giant fucking Navy, and my giant fucking Navy is awesome. Everyone else was a generation, if not 10, behind. And so that was not necessarily even possible for them to do. But a lot of people tried. A lot of people poured a lot of money into saying, well, if this is the standard of power, I want to be at that table. By the time the Dreadnought race ended, within 3 generations, there was nuclear war. Nuclear weapons replaced the Dreadnought as the large strategic stick, well, in between carriers and battle fleets. But you see what I mean? There is that curve of change. And so every so often, there is an investment that is necessary in strategic defense. And you find that going all in too early on something that is replaced is not necessarily the wise choice. But I digress, and hindsight is 20/20. I have no idea why it's lagging. All right, looks like saving and loading helps. Maybe. But I'm doing the best I can right now, and I'm just going to tell you, I am uncertain as to the state of geopolitics. I've had plenty of little nations come up and start throwing fucking hands and talking shit, and I'll tell you this much, like, I wouldn't. I think Brazil is a certainly power in the rough. I think that Brazil could very, very easily become a first-rate nation, if not a regional superpower. It's got so many resources, and it's got a lot of resources, and there's a lot of potential. I don't want anyone to think that my assessment of Brazil's naval arms race, especially the Dreadnought portion, is reflective of their entire capability. In truth, their modern navy is making some very interesting movements, including pursuing a nuclear submarine. They've already started to build new frigates, which are Krupp designs made by ThyssenKrupp do Brasil. They've made a lot of investments, and they're slowly trying to get things, just back on track. And what's interesting is there's a lot of really good interstate security agreements between all these nations. So there's no reason to not see like a South American NATO. I mean, I foresee a lot of interesting options going down this road, but we'll have to see how time plays out. You know what I mean? You have to see how time plays out, because like most things, it's great to have a good idea. It's really hard to make a good idea come alive. There are a lot of pieces of defense posturing that are just absolutely difficult to learn. And many nations walk that tightrope because on one side of the tightrope is ruin because you spent money on weapons that don't work and will never arrive in time. And on the other side, there's the let it be. And that typically causes more damage than anything else. So it's a game of no decisions or bad decisions. That's why I think it's important to study.
Keep on, please, I report to you.